I want to tell you about my mother's hands. She had a gardener's hands. Strong, wide palms. Short nails. The kind of hands that were always doing something. Kneading bread dough, pulling weeds, folding laundry, writing letters. She was never still. Even watching television, she'd have something in her hands. A cup of tea. A crossword puzzle. A piece of mending. I noticed, standing in her kitchen 3 days after her funeral, that the house felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. And then I understood. Nothing was moving in it. For the first time in my life, the house was perfectly still. She had made this place feel alive with her constant motion for 60 years. And now she was gone. And upstairs, in the attic, hidden under 30 years of carefully stacked boxes, there was a journal that explained something I had never been allowed to understand. About the house, about the tree line at the edge of the property, about why she had never, in all my years of growing up in that house, ever let me go outside alone after dark. The Red State Horror presents a true story. The Journal. Let's start from the Part 1, Coming Home, Pickett County, Tennessee. 3 days after the funeral. My mother's name was Ruth Ellen Calloway. She was born in 1948 in Pickett County, Tennessee, in the same house where she died 81 years later, in the same bedroom where her own mother had died before her. She married my father in 1971, had me in 1974, lost my father to a stroke in 2003, and lived alone in that house for 21 years after that without ever once suggesting she wanted to leave. I always understood that. The house was hers in a way that went deeper than ownership. She had been born in it, grown up in it, raised me in it, and grown old in it. Every room held 40 years of her decisions. The wallpaper she'd chosen in 1978, the kitchen cabinets she'd painted herself in 1985, the back porch she'd screened in during the summer. I turned 10 because the mosquitoes were bad that year, and she was determined to sit outside in the evenings regardless. The house was hers, essentially. The physical expression of a life lived in one place with full intention. I drove back up to Pickett County 3 days after the funeral. My husband had offered to come, and I'd told him I needed to go alone, which was true. I needed the 4-hour drive to think, and I needed whatever time I spent in the house to be just me and her. Me and the version of her that still lived in every room. I pulled into the driveway at about 2 in the afternoon. June, so the days were long, and the light was still high and golden in the way it gets in the Tennessee Hill Country in early summer. The house looked the same as it always looked. A white wood frame covered porch and the 2 rocking chairs that had been there since I was a child. The rose bushes along the porch railing that she tended every spring. The old oak tree off to the right side of the yard, massive and permanent, the one I'd climbed as a kid until she put a stop to it. Not because it was dangerous, she'd said, but because she needed the yard to stay clear. I'd always accepted that without questioning it. She needed the yard to stay clear. I stayed out of the tree. Children accept things without understanding them all the time. I went inside. I made a cup of tea from the boxes of tea she kept in the cabinet to the right of the stove. I sat in her chair in the living room. I let myself be in the place where she had been. The first afternoon, I didn't do much. I sorted through some paperwork on her desk, bagged a few things for donation, and made a list of what needed to be dealt with in what order. The work of loss. Administrative. Necessary. Something to do with your hands when your hands don't know what to do with themselves. That night I slept in my old bedroom. It's the same twin bed, the same window facing the backyard, and the same view of the tree line at the edge of the property that I'd looked at my whole childhood without thinking anything of it. Just trees. Just the edge of the woods where the yard stopped being a yard and started being forest. I fell asleep looking at it, the way I had 1,000 times as a girl. The next afternoon, I went up to the attic. Part 2. The box in the attic. What she put where she knew I'd find it. Our attic is the full length of the house, low-ceilinged, lit by 2 small windows at either end. My mother had used it for storage the way people use attics, carefully, organized, with everything in labeled boxes arranged in rows. She was a methodical woman. Nothing was thrown up there and forgotten. Everything had a place, and a label, and a reason. I was looking for the Christmas ornaments which I knew she kept up there and which I wanted to bring home with me. I knew roughly where they'd be, back left corner, near the east window. I found them, and when I turned to carry them toward the stairs, I noticed the stack of boxes that had been arranged in front of the east window. 7 boxes, stacked carefully, no labels. Every other stack in that attic had a label. These 7 boxes said nothing. I set the ornaments down. I moved the top 2 boxes aside. Underneath them, an old wooden box, the kind people used to use for blankets, with a hinged lid and a simple latch. Not ornate, practical. The wood was worn smooth with age and handling. I lifted the lid. Inside, a leather journal. Dark green, the leather soft from years of handling. Underneath it, 3 other journals, newer looking. And underneath those, a manila envelope, sealed, with my name written on the front in my mother's handwriting. I sat down on the attic floor with the wooden box between my knees, and I looked at all of this for a while before I touched anything else. I'm not sure what I was waiting for. Permission, maybe. The sense that opening this was what she'd intended. I looked at those 7 unlabeled boxes arranged in front of the window. She'd put them there so I'd move them, so I'd find what was underneath. She'd arranged it so the only way to find the wooden box was to move the boxes that were hiding it, but she'd made sure I could still find it. The unlabeled boxes would stop me long enough to look. She had planned this. At some point before she died, she had planned this. She had decided I should find the wooden box after she was gone. She had put it where I would eventually go, and she had arranged the path so I could walk it. My mother, who never did anything without a reason, had left me a way in. I picked up the green leather journal. I opened it to the first page. Her handwriting. The date at the top of the first entry, September 14th, 1991. I had been 17 years old in September of 1991. I started to read. Part 3. What she saw. 30 years of watching the tree line. The journal started simply. The first entry was 4 lines. She described seeing something at the tree line at the back of the property at dusk. A shape. She thought it was a deer at first. The way they come to the edge of the woods in the evening, testing whether it's safe to come into the yard. She made a note of it the way she'd make a note of anything she wanted to remember. September 14th, 1991. Something at the tree line. East Edge. Approximately 7 p.m. We'll watch tomorrow. The second entry. The next day. Nothing at the tree line. Third entry. A week later. Something again. Same location. Same time. She wrote, larger than a deer. Moving differently. Not like an animal I recognize. I read those 3 entries sitting on the attic floor, and I turned the page, and I kept on reading. By page 12, she stopped calling it an animal. She didn't call it anything else either. She was careful about that, my mother. She documented what she saw without reaching for a name for it. Shape. Movement. Approximate height, when she could estimate it. Behavior. Duration. She wrote it the way a scientist writes field notes. Precise, stripped of interpretation, limited to observation. What she observed across the autumn, winter, and spring of 1991 and 1992 was this. Something came to the tree line at the back of the property on irregular intervals between dusk and full dark. It did not enter the yard. It stood at the edge of the woods, and it watched the house. She could not see it clearly in the low light. Still, she could see it was there. A shape that did not move the way trees move, that did not behave the way animals behave, that stood with a stillness that she found difficult to describe and returned to attempting to describe in entry after entry. Not like the stillness of something resting, like the stillness of something waiting. She had never woken me up. She had watched this thing from the back window, or from the kitchen, or from the back porch, on at least 40 documented occasions across 1991 and 1992, and she had never said a word to me. I had been 17 years old, living in that house, and sleeping in the bedroom with the window facing the backyard. I had never known. I moved to the second journal, which covered 1993 through 1998. The entries became more frequent, then less frequent, then more frequent again. The observation was consistent. Something came to the tree line. She documented it. She said nothing to anyone. In 1994, she found the marks on the oak tree, the old oak on the right side of the yard, the one I'd been told not to climb. She described going out to examine the tree one morning after a sighting the night before and finding marks in the bark at approximately eye level, not like claw marks, not like anything she could explain by conventional means. She photographed them with a disposable camera. She described them as deliberate. She wrote, I don't know what made these. I know they weren't there before this year. She had stopped me from climbing that tree in 1982. The marks appeared in 1994, but she had been watching the tree line since 1991. In 1995, she began checking the tree line every night before bed. She wrote this as a matter of fact, the way you'd write down a new habit. Added a nightly check before bed, the last thing. It quickly became clear from the entries that the nightly check had become so routine, she stopped noting it as an addition and simply began each entry with the check's result. Checked the east tree line, nothing. Or checked, present, 40 minutes, and then gone. Every night, for 30 years. My mother, who had always seemed to sleep well, who had never seemed anxious or afraid, and who had kept a garden and made tea and sat on the porch in the evenings like a woman who had made peace with her life. She had been checking the tree line every single night before she went to bed for 30 years. I sat in the attic with that journal in my hands, and I thought about every night of my childhood. Every night I had gone to bed in that house while she was still up. I had assumed she was reading, or finishing the crossword, or watching the late news. Just a woman staying up a little later than her teenager. She had been standing at the back window checking the tree line every single night, making sure it was still at the edge and hadn't come closer. Making sure I was safe. I need to stop here for just a second. I know you're in the middle of something. I know you don't want me to stop. But I need to ask you directly, right now. If you found this channel tonight and you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now. Hit the bell too. Every Thursday I bring you a story like this one. Something real, something that happened, something that deserves to be told with the care it requires. This is why this channel exists. For the Ruth Ellen Callaways of the world. The people who carried something alone for 30 years because they loved someone too much to let them be afraid. Subscribe. Be here Thursday. The last section of this story is the one I almost didn't say out loud. Stay with me. Part 4. The last entries. What she wrote in the final year. The third and fourth journals covered 1999 through 2021. I read through them on the attic floor until my legs went numb, and I had to move to the old wooden chair my mother kept up there for exactly this kind of activity because she was the sort of person who kept a chair in the attic. The middle years of the journals were the most consistent. She had established her rhythms, and she kept to them. Nightly check. Documentation of sightings, which averaged between 8 and 15 per year. Notes about any changes. Movement patterns, the behavior at the tree line, any new marks on the oak. In 2003, the year my father died, the sightings increased significantly. She documented 23 in a single year. She noted this without comment, the way she'd note anything else. 2003, increased activity. No apparent explanation. She never called anyone. She never told anyone. She documented, and she watched, and she did not, in 30 years of journals, ever suggest she was afraid. What she was, I think, reading between the lines of 30 years of careful, controlled field notes was determined. She had decided something about this thing, whatever it was, and the decision was that it was going to stay at the tree line. It was not going to enter her yard. It was not going to come near her house. And it was absolutely not going to come near her child. How she accomplished that, the journals don't fully say. There are references in the 2001 and 2002 entries to certain things she did. She describes them obliquely as measures, which could mean anything from prayer to something more physical. She visited the property line. She replaced what she calls the markers, which I found no other reference to, on 3 separate occasions. She does not explain what the markers were or how she knew to use them. What is clear is that whatever she did, it held. The thing never entered the yard. In 30 years of documentation, she never once wrote that it had crossed the tree line. It always stopped at the edge. The final entries in the 4th journal were from 2024. The last year of her life, the sightings had decreased significantly in the previous 2 years. She noted this was something that might, if you were reading carefully, be cautious optimism. Activity declining. Fewer appearances. The last sighting was 11 weeks ago. She allowed herself one sentence of hope, for the first time in 30 years of journals. Perhaps it is moving on. The final entry in the 4th journal was dated March 3, 2025, 12 weeks before she died. She wrote, "No sighting in 4 months. I am choosing to believe this is finally over because I am 81 years old, and I am tired, and I have earned the right to choose what I believe. I am not afraid of dying. I have had a full life in this house, and I have protected this house, and I am at peace with all of it. What I am afraid of is what happens after I am gone. I won't be here to check the line. I won't be here to maintain the markers. I won't be here to stand between it and whoever is in this house. I've done everything I know how to do. The rest of it is going to have to be up to the house itself, or to whoever comes back to it after me." She set the pen down after that entry and never picked it up again. 12 weeks later, she died. 3 weeks after that, I came home. Part 5. The envelope. What she'd left for me to read. After the 4 journals, there was the manila envelope with my name on it. I held it for a while before I opened it. Long enough that the light through the attic window shifted from afternoon to early evening. Long enough that I was aware, sitting in my mother's attic with her life's secret in my hands, that the day was moving toward dusk. I opened the envelope. 3 pages. Folded together. Her handwriting was more deliberate than in the journals. This had been written with the knowledge that someone else would read it. She had written it to me. I'm not going to read the letter to you in full. Parts of it are mine. But I want to tell you what she said, in her own words as best I can give them to you. Because she wrote it clearly, and she deserved to be heard. She explained that she had first seen it in the summer of 1991. She had not told my father because she hadn't been sure yet what she was seeing, and then, by the time she was sure, she had decided it was better managed quietly. She had not told me because I was 17, and she was not going to give her child something like this to carry. She had not told anyone in the 30 years since because there was nothing anyone else could do about it, and she had found methods of keeping it at bay, and those methods had held. She described the methods without detail, the way you describe a household maintenance routine to someone who will need to keep up with it after you're gone. Matter of fact, here is what I did. Here is how often. Here is where you will find what you need. She had left supplies in the garden shed, which is labeled. She had left instructions for the markers, which she described simply as old knowledge that her own mother had passed to her, which she had not had cause to use until 1991. She had written it down so I would have it if I needed it. Then she wrote the paragraph I have returned to more times than any other in the 3 months since I found it. I know you are going to be angry with me for not telling you. You have the right to that anger. I kept this from you because protecting you from fear was the most important job I had, and I did that job for as long as I could. You were never in danger. I made sure of that. I am sorry I can't continue to make sure of it, but I did everything I could to give you the tools to do it yourself. You are braver than you know. You have always been braver than you know. I wouldn't be leaving this to you if I didn't believe that completely. I read that paragraph sitting on the attic floor of my childhood home as the afternoon light turned orange through the small window. I sat with it for a long time. Then I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, and put the envelope back in the wooden box. I stacked the journals on top of it. I closed the lid, and then I stood up and looked out the attic window. The yard below. The garden. The old oak tree off to the right, its bark visible from above, had the marks on it that I now knew the meaning of. The tree line at the back edge of the property was going dark as the sun dropped behind the ridge. I looked at the tree line for a long time. I have no way of knowing if I was seeing what she spent 30 years seeing. I have no way of knowing if the shape I thought I saw at the eastern edge of the tree line, at the boundary between the yard and the forest, where the last light was failing, was the thing she had documented in 4 journals over 3 decades, or was a shadow, or was what you see when you are looking for something so hard that your eyes start finding it. I have no way of knowing that. What I know is that I went down to the garden shed before it got fully dark. I found what she'd left labeled and waiting. I walked the property line the way her letter described, and when I went to bed that night, I checked the tree line from the back window before I turned off the light. The way she had. Every night. For 30 years. I've been back to that house 3 times since that afternoon in the attic. Each time I check the property line when I arrive. Each time I do what the letter described before, I leave. Each time I check the tree line from the back window before I go to bed. I haven't seen anything at the tree line. Not yet. I don't know if that means the methods are holding, or if it means whatever was there has gone for good, or if it means I haven't been there at the right hour in the right light. I've thought a lot about why she didn't tell me. I've worked through some of the anger she predicted, and then come out the other side of it into something that feels more like understanding. She was a practical woman who found a practical solution to an impossible problem and maintained that solution for 30 years without asking for help, credit, or acknowledgement. She did it the same way she did everything else, quietly, competently, without making it anyone else's burden. And when she knew her time was running out, she made sure I would find what I needed. She put the wooden box where I would go. She arranged the path so I could walk it. She wrote the instructions clearly, and she wrote the letter honestly, and she told me I was braver than I knew. My mother, who had gardener's hands and made biscuits on Saturdays, and watched the tree line every night for 30 years. I keep the letter in my coat pocket now, not because I need to read it. I have it memorized, because I want to keep it close. Because she wrote it to be kept close. If your family had a house with something like this, a room that was always locked, a part of the property you were always told to avoid, a rule your parents kept that you never fully understood, leave it in the comments. I read everything. I follow up on everything I can verify. This is Red State Horror. I'll see you next Thursday.